This story is so amazing. Of course, we just had the anti-war rally, and then we had the 20-year anniversary of the Iraq War, and by now, even the neocons are coming to the reality that it was a mistake, and they're having to admit it on TV. So at least we've gotten to that place. But you alluded to this earlier, Professor. This is Colin Powells, I believe, chief. What is it? His chief of staff, Richard Haas, and he was absolutely destroyed for this tweet. And I'll read it for those that are listening. It says, the U.S. government and my boss at the time, Colin Powell, did not lie about weapons of mass destruction. The word lie involves intent.
What?
There was no lie. We got it wrong. My bad. I guess we misinterpreted intelligence and assumed Saddam was hiding weapons of mass destruction when he was hiding his lack of weapons of mass destruction. No more, no less, and then of course he gets completely destroyed. Here's the professor. Go ahead, Nick. And then
I want Pastor Zinkis if he wants to try as well, but who the fuck does he think he's fooling? Like, and this is what the strategy is going to be moving forward, and that's why independent media and what Professor Zinkis and people who call out these people, it's going to be so important moving forward because they are trying to rewrite history in real time. Why you guys think they have George W. Bush dancing on Ellen? Why do you think they're trying to rehabilitate his image? Now they're trying to rewrite the Iraq War. I cannot emphasize this enough. The Iraq War was not a mistake. The Iraq War was a crime. You guys understand? But Zenkis, you want to chime in? Because I can rant on this all day.
Yeah, I mean, well, right. The Iraq War and our ensuing wars for the past 20 years in the Middle East and Africa, because remember, Somalia and Libya is part of Africa too, for Americans who don't know all of that. The whole thing is one big war crime. And remember, the Project for a New American Century in the late 1990s said, we need a reason to go to Iraq and occupy the oil fields. We need more of a stronghold in the Middle East. In fact, they had it on their website for years. We need a new Pearl Harbor. Well, by chance, they got one with 9/11, and then after that, we attacked the country that didn't attack, two countries that didn't attack us, because Afghanistan didn't attack us, and neither did Iraq. I wonder, to just brush this off and say, look, we got the intelligence, we misinterpreted it. You didn't do your due diligence, because if something isn't true, if something is true, there'll be some evidence of it. Maybe you misinterpret that evidence because something is true and you just don't understand it. But if it's not true, if they don't have WMDs, then of course there's no evidence because they don't have them. What are you misinterpreting? So what these guys did was they went before the world at the United Nations and had props. All of it was fake. All of it was spectacle. See, it's more than a lie. It's spectacle. It's meant to dazzle us. And it's also meant to get into our emotions. There's a reason Colin Powell, who bears a lot of guilt here because he had a lot of credibility. A lot of people respected and liked Colin Powell, and he knew it. And he stood before the UN and the world, and he had all these props. And there's a reason he didn't just read from a page. There's a reason he had props. He had props because he wanted to get an emotional response. Here's the yellow cake uranium. Here are the pictures. They were all fake. It was all spectacle because there were no WMDs in Iraq. So what did you have pictures of? The only reason they had those pictures and the props were for spectacle, to make us go, oh my God, this is bad, to get an emotional reaction. And this is the core definition of propaganda, which is now called public relations, but it's to get an emotional reaction from people deep in our brains that bypasses our ability to think. and make judgments. And that's exactly what Colin Powell did. And as a result, millions of innocent people are dead, their lives destroyed, their economy destroyed for generations. That's my take.
So, this is a great comment by Jennifer. I'll pass to you, CJ.
Go ahead. Go
ahead. Jennifer always leave great, insightful comments. Invasion of Iraq has much more clarity than Iraq war. So she's Jennifer saying, call it and I need to work on this as well. Don't say the war in Iraq, say the invasion of Iraq. Great point. Calling it the Iraq war actually obfuscates how horrible the United States invasion of Iraq was. So many wars that the West are involved in are invasions. That's a great point, and I definitely will keep that in mind because I need to start just saying the invasion of Iraq more. Great comment, but CJ, go ahead.
Yeah, and to that point, let's see. So Richard Haas, we saw his comments. I'm sorry, his tweet. Now let's read the comment. So I updated the thing to say the invasion of the Iraq war 20 years later. So to your point, Jennifer, here is this ridiculous article. I only have to read about a minute and a half of this. It's so ridiculous. So, and it's on Project Syndicate. So this is a website you can go if you want to. Yeah, if you want to go and hear some ridiculous nonsense, that you go here. This is where you want to go as ops, you know. So here is what Richard says. It's called Revisiting America's War of Choice. Now he's calling it this phrase, war of choice in Iraq. And let me blow it up just for those seeing impaired.
Wonder how long they was testing that phrase. Wonder how much they tested that before they decided to go with the war of choice. That's what you calling it? The invasion of Iraq, sir. Let's continue.
It says wars are fought not only for the battlefield, not only on the battlefield, but also in the domestic political debates and in histories written after the fact. In the case, wow, wait, I think I'm getting an epiphany here. Listen to what he just said. He's saying that wars are also fought in how history is written, not that is written factually. You hear what he's saying here? Wars are fought not only on the battlefield, but also in domestic political battles in history written after the fact. That's amazing to me. But anyway,
they are trying to condition people to support future wars. You guys understand? They're trying to condition people to support what's coming next. They know what's coming next, so now they're trying to rewrite Iraq in this nonsense way. But continue, CJ.
In the case of the U.S., at least they said he uses the word here. In the case of the U.S. invasion of Iraq 20 years ago, we are still in the final phase, seeking a elusive consensus about the war's legacy. Like it's up in the air or something. New York. One advantage that historians have over journalists concerns time. Not so much in the sense that they are free from urgent deadlines, but that they have the deeper perspective conferred by the years or decades between events and the actions of writing about them. 20 years is not a long time in historic terms, of course, but when it comes to understanding the war that the U.S. or the United States launched against Iraq in March 2003, it is all we have. Not surprisingly, even 2 decades after the war, there is no consistency regarding its legacy. This is to be expected because all wars are fought 3 times. First comes the political and domestic struggle over the decision to go to war. Then comes the actual war and all that happens on the battlefield. Finally, a long debate over the war's significance ensues, weighing the cost and benefits, determining the lessons learned, and issuing forward-looking policy recommendations. What he's trying to do here is like now you feel like the emotion is gone Now let's insert some sort of illogical logic.
That's when the real propaganda.
Because you have to wait till the emotion is gone, and that's what they're testing. This 20-year mark. Is it 20 years? Is it 30 years? Where we can test these things, but this is literally what they're doing. So maybe they've been working on this for 20 years, Professor and Nick, working on what can we do. Maybe that's how long they took them to come up with this choice of war. What do they call it? The choice of war, or choice of Iraq, or whatever. But go and read the rest of this article. This is only part of the segment. The real part is getting to the Morning Joe segment, and go and read where it says the decision to intervene. It is so preposterous. But it is a longer article, so we're not going to be able to read all of it, but go and check that out. Now let me bring up the main event. And you saw the intro to this. Now let's go back to the beginning of this. Now, Morning Joe, of course, had to tackle the Iraq war, but what they decided to do was intertwine 20 years Iraq with Russia and the Ukraine war and China and Russia. So it's 3 stories really that they're intertwining in this segment.
Before you do it, can I just
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
I just want to point out what's on the screen right now. Vanguard Group. Vanguard Group and BlackRock, along with State Street, but mostly Vanguard and BlackRock, own the world. They own every company. They own the military-industrial complex. They own the banks. They own Wall Street. They are the wealthiest entity on the planet today. So no surprise that they're sponsoring Morning Joe anyway.
So we see who's sponsoring Morning Joe, so we know who their audience is. And we always say this. Nick and I always talk about Morning Joe's audience, but let's listen to Morning Joe.
It's 40 past the hour. Welcome back. Turning now to the war in Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin visited the Russian-occupied city of Mariupol, located at the southern edge of Ukraine's Donetsk region. Video from Saturday shows Putin driving through the city, touring reconstruction sites and more. In over a year of fighting, it was Putin's first trip to the territory captured by his forces, and it's the closest he's ventured to the front lines. Meanwhile, Chinese leader Xi Jinping is in Moscow right now as he prepares to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. He touched down moments ago, and the visit is Putin's most notable diplomatic engagement with another country since he launched his invasion. Russian media claims both leaders will sign a total of 10 documents, including 2 joint statements, one on comprehensive partnership and the other.
I must say, the United States are shaking in their heels over this meeting. It is, and this segment kind of speaks to that, how their fear, and in anytime they're bringing on former NATO people, that means this is a serious segment that we need to propagandize people about. And this guy was the right person to bring on, Admiral James. I forget how to say his last name, but James S. So let's continue to listen.
On economic cooperation up until the year 2030. Joining us now, former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, retired 4-star Navy Admiral James Stavridis. He's Chief International Analyst for NBC News and President of the Council on Foreign Relations, Richard Haass. Joe?
Richard, taken together, you think that Putin's visit to Mariupol, as well as Xi's visit to Moscow, sends an ominous message to Ukraine and the world? What is it?
The message is not peace is at hand. The fact that Putin is physically there, so personally associating himself with Mariupol and Crimea the day before, essentially, this is not a man, shall we say, on the brink of peace talks. This is someone who's saying these are Russian territories from his point of view. China, Xi Jinping is flying into it.
Now, you see how they keep conflating territories with peace, but they don't directly say it. They keep saying this isn't peace talks. They're still talking about because that's what they consider. I guess that's what they're trying to equate peace to be, meaning that Putin would have to give up some sort of territories in order for them to agree to a peace deal. That's how I'm reading it. Or is anybody reading it differently?
And the most hilarious thing about this, China, who actually negotiated peace between Saudi Arabia and Iran, China, who wanted to set up a peace talk between Zelensky and Putin that was shut down by Ukraine and the United States. And you had John Kirby, who called ceasefire negotiations with Russia unacceptable. I'm going to bring that video up after your segment here. But meanwhile, on Morning Joe, they were presenting it as, oh my God, Putin and Xi meeting is ominous because it shows that they do not want peace. You mean that's the United States position? this program is nothing but lies. But Zinkus, you want to chime in?
Well, yeah, just this morning, representative of the United States State Department decried Xi's efforts to broker a peace deal, saying a ceasefire was unacceptable. So let's just be real clear here, because whenever I say, and I've been saying it for a year now, since the Russians invaded Ukraine, which I called out when it happened, like invasions are bad. It should not have happened. It was people will suffer and have suffered because of it. Although I do think they had a reason to have problems with the whole NATO connection and all. I'm against invasions, but it doesn't matter because I immediately called to push for peace. And every time I do, every single time, people say, Putin doesn't want peace. Well, here the United States, literally, official policy, the Biden administration is a ceasefire in Ukraine is unacceptable. And let's just say we think at least 100 to 120,000 troops in Ukraine have been killed. Right now, there is a bit of a news story in the past week or so about how Ukrainian soldiers at the front are deserting in record numbers. It's gotten so bad that Zelensky had to take his non-democratic, obviously he's an autocrat now, government and greatly increase the penalties for desertion. You wouldn't do that if it wasn't a problem happening in mass. And why are they deserting? This war is brutal. It's terrible. If anybody cares about Ukrainian lives, the only thing you should want is a ceasefire. The United States is saying a ceasefire is unacceptable. Therefore, the United States does not care about Ukrainian lives. And by the way, this guy that they're talking to is from the Council on Foreign Relations. Okay, so they are a pro-war, pro-Wall Street think tank, and they've been around for like 100 years, made up of Wall Street executives, bankers, heads of like military industrial complex companies, chemical companies, and think tanks that are all kind of similar. And they meet in secret. This is literally the council, the CFR, the Council on Foreign Relations, is a cabal who has supported every single war we've ever had. Every invasion, let's use that term, every invasion of a sovereign nation has been supported by the Council of Foreign Relations. So, of course, Morning Joe and Mika, who are just mouthpieces for the establishment, they have this guy on, and it's horrendous.
I'm going to show you guys this just real quick. Not only is Ukraine suffering through desertion, you now have footage of Ukrainian soldiers kidnapping people. And let me show you guys this. And I see these videos so many times, but whenever they accuse the other side, they never have like these hardcore videos. I'll just read this tweet. Another sad video of mobilization in Odessa, Ukraine. They kidnapped the Russian population from the city, just as they did with the Hungarian, the Romanian people. And this is a footage of what they are doing there. It just shows how desperate the Ukrainian side is becoming with people and manpower, losing 100,000 Ukrainian soldiers, on top of losing political will in Europe. You can pull your stuff back up, CJ. as well as losing political capital to continue this war, while Russia can just stall this out.
Mm-hmm.
Russia's just chilling.
So, yeah. So let me insert this. I'm gonna go back to the Joe clip, but let's just get this out of the way because he says it here, and they're gonna say it in that. They're gonna say it in Morning Joe that he's not about peace. Now let's listen. This is both of them sitting together. This is Russia TV who put out this clip. I saw it from Convo Couch. So let's listen.
We have looked closely on your proposals to settle the crisis unfolding in Ukraine. Of course, we will have the opportunity to discuss these proposals. We do know that you are guided by the principles of justice and respecting the fundamental principles of international law, and you are guided by the principle of indivisible security for all countries. You also may be aware, and you're aware that we are open to negotiations. We have looked closely on your proposal.
All right, and then it loops. So you hear from his own mouth, because you get this a lot from Marianne Williamson and people in those types. Oh, he doesn't want peace. What are you talking about? He doesn't want peace. This is specifically from his mouth. And I know you have this clip, but since I have it here, Nick, I can play it real quick. So
yeah, no worries. Go ahead.
Same one. I don't know if it's the same one.
If coming out of this meeting, there's some sort of call for a ceasefire, well, that's just going to be unacceptable because all that's going to do, Mike, is ratify Russia's conquest to date. All that's going to do is give Mr. Putin more time to refit, retrain, reman, and try to plan for renewed offensives at a time of his choosing.
Renewed offensives of what? If you're saying this gives him everything, he already has it. Wouldn't he already have it? Like what gives him time to do what?
Isn't it funny how whenever there are calls for ceasefire, the United States is like, oh my God, that's unacceptable. Then whenever there are calls for peace, they're like, how can you say the American people have the right to make that decision for the Ukrainian people? That is what you're doing right now. You see how they play both sides? How dare you decide for the Ukrainian people and say they should have peace? Meanwhile, hey man, should we do ceasefire? No, that's unacceptable.
Well, and
I think he says that. I think he says that in this clip or another one where they ask him, should Ukraine? And he was like, no. And he's like, what do you think? And it's like, yeah, and we're going to tell them no, too, is what he says.
And I just want to put a point on this another criticism I get a lot when I say, I mean, you wouldn't think this would be radical to say, we need a ceasefire. The war must end. We need peace negotiations. I want the killing to stop. I want the killing to stop should never, ever be labeled a radical viewpoint. Or an anti-American viewpoint. But when I do say those things, another one of the popular pushbacks I get, the talking points, is this is Ukraine's decision, not ours. So I just want to let people know, if they're not aware of this, Ukraine would not exist if it wasn't for the United States. Their economy is being backstopped by the United States. Their government is being backstopped by the United States. And so is their military. Literally, there'd be no Ukraine if it weren't for the United States. And the $125 billion is just what we've given them in public. We have a black military and intelligence budget worth trillions that no one ever sees. Don't tell me that's not where they're putting their money. So I'm sure it's far more than $125 billion. Their entire society is dependent on us. Therefore, the United States has a right to say what happens. And the point I'm getting to here is the people of the United States, you, CJ, Nick, me, other folks, have the right to say to our government, we don't want to continue funding, killing, murder, and destruction. We want peace. It is a legitimate thing for a United States citizen to say. We are literally bankrolling the entire nation and their army right now. It is our place.
Sound like a Putin puppet to me calling for peace. How dare you?
Let's listen to the last few seconds here. Let's listen to the last few seconds of this clip.
To plan for renewed offensives at a time of his choosing. We hope, and we've said this before, that President Xi will call and talk to President Zelensky because we believe the Chinese need to get the Ukrainian perspective here. that
he thinks. Who do you think when he says they need to get the Ukrainian perspective? Whose perspective do you really think he's talking about? Who gave the Ukrainian their perspective? That's a different way of asking.
They're not going to talk to the Ukrainians that went. They're not going to talk to the 40% of the Ukrainian people that speak Russian, that actually have family ties to Russia. That was part of the report that the BBC did quite some time ago, explaining how many people in Ukraine are pro-Russian, and that's why I have nothing but disdain for these NATO leftists who pretend they are standing for Ukrainian people. You are not. You are literally standing on one side of a conflict. You are supporting the fascists who use political violence, who threaten the president, who threatened Zelensky when he floated the idea of peace. There are people who used to go to pro-Russian rallies, and you have Nazi thugs who will use political violence on these people the same way that these liberals freak out about Republicans. In our country, they cheer on in Ukraine. So they do not stand with the Ukrainian people. They chose a side in a conflict. We need to make that 100% clear. But go ahead, CJ.
Yeah, so we got about another 5 minutes in the segment, not the video, but the entire segment. We're almost at the end here, unless you guys have some more receipts to add. But I want you to hear some of this more of this conversation about just how they talk about China and the meeting and just the fear sort of mongering they're trying to do in this segment.
Been 13 months, 14 months, and Xi Jinping closely linked himself to Vladimir Putin. China may posture, Joe, talking about peace, but there's no way, based on its 12-point plan or anything else, China is going to be a force for peace here. So what this suggests to me, this reinforces the prediction that this is likely to be a long war.
Yeah, certainly.
This is likely to be a long war based off what? Him going to talk to Putin. That makes it makes him think it's going to be a long war.
No time soon. But this war continuing for a long time is not in the best interest, Admiral, of either of those men or their countries. I'm just wondering, I think maybe I always go one layer too deep on these things, but I would think if Putin were in a position of weakness before Xi was coming down and thought Xi was going to pressure him to move towards peace, the first thing he would do would be to visit Mariupol and say, don't even think about asking me to negotiate back the land bridge between Russia and Crimea. What are your thoughts?
I think that makes sense. And, I just happened to be in San Antonio, Texas today. I'm a couple of 100 yards from the Alamo. We got to remember that Mariupol is the Alamo of this war. This is where Ukrainian commando.
The Alamo of this war. Do you think he just happened to be right there? Do NATO or CIA people happen to be anywhere on the planet? Or are they shit scheduled? It's unbelievable. Let's listen.
Was held out till the very end. Putin was forced to essentially destroy the city in order to conquer it. And look at the optics of the visits, Joe. He goes there effectively in the middle of the night so the cameras don't pick up the blasted landscape all around him. And he's driving himself. And, he's trying to show he's a manly man, I guess, but it's just a pathetic send-up if you stop and think about it. So flash back a year, he's really whispering, sipping vodka.
He's really having to sell this as a Putin looks desperate thing. I just don't understand who's buying this.
Telling his best friend forever, President Xi, hey, I'm going to be in Kyiv in 2 to 3 days. Well, here we are 14 months later, and he's like a criminal returning to the scene of the crime, as the Ukrainians have been saying.
Like, their language is so cartoonish.
Yeah,
like this is one of those segments. This is one of those segments that I don't even have to interrupt that many times, because how desperate they sound and how cartoonish their language is says everything. This is the response that the corporate establishment has as the United States lose global influence and power. China just pulled the ultimate flex on the United States. Russia and BRICS is the ultimate flex on the United States. So now Morning Joe is shitting their pants. Western chauvinist boomers are shitting their pants, and now they are overcompensating, and the rest of the world sees how desperate they are. This only works on a very small percentage of brainwashed Western chauvinists. The rest of the world sees this and they say, man, the United States is scared, and they have good reason to be.
I don't understand. What did they think would happen, though, to these two countries? If you're going at both of them at the same time, why wouldn't the two people, your nemesis that you're going at, why wouldn't they just say, hey, why don't we team up? Like, I don't get the strategy. That's what doesn't make sense. Even for this empire, I don't get the strategy. Professor, if you wanted to chime in.
I'm hoping this isn't the strategy. We don't know how the elite, and there is an elite, those who run, like I said, Council on Foreign Relations, the inner core of that organization, basically set foreign policy for the United States and have for almost 100 years. We don't know exactly how they think. I do know this: they have bunkers, and never trust a psychopath with a bunker to run your country, because these people always think there's an exit plan for them. I think it was really well represented in, and David Sirota was involved with this film, but it was excellent in the film Don't Look Up, when the rich elite get on a spaceship and end up going to this other planet. And if you haven't seen it yet, I don't want to ruin the ending, but the point is they think they always have an escape plan. My concern is that there are some people who think this is a good thing that Russia and China are getting together because they want the United States to fight and win both of them. That would be an all-out nuclear war. Estimates, sober estimates, are that a full-scale nuclear war in the world today would result in the deaths of 5 billion people. The atomic scientists, right? The group of atomic scientists has put the hands of the doomsday clock closer to midnight just a few months ago than at any point in history. This is serious. This is not, and I have to say, I do think there's some credence to the argument that there are some really evil psychos out there who want a world war with China and Russia. And we only have to rewind back to 2016 when Hillary Clinton lost one of the most winnable campaigns in history. Any normal, non-sociopathic candidate, she is sociopath, she's disgusting, normal sociopathic candidate would have beaten a reality star who, you know, whatever. Donald Trump is Donald Trump. That's a whole other discussion. And they immediately, they deflected criticism. Oh, shoot. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Hear you.
They immediately deflected criticism of the terrible campaign they ran, where they ignored and abandoned the working class, where she continued to give speeches for Goldman Sachs while in the campaign, a declared candidate, and kowtow to Wall Street, where she continued to take donations from private prisons. They deflected from all of that. And by the way, there's an excellent article in the New York Times from 2017, right after the election, where they went to black neighborhoods in Milwaukee. They went to a barbershop and they interviewed adult black men who did not vote for Hillary and did not regret it. And this is after Trump ran. And their basic, synopsis was, what have the Democrats done for us? What would she do for us? We're done, right? So they didn't want that criticism. So what did they do? They created Russiagate. And the creation of Russiagate, I think, was all about this. Hillary was supposed to win that election, and we were supposed to be fighting Putin 6 years ago. That's what they wanted then. And they thought they would have it, and oops, all of a sudden, by a razor-thin margin, Donald Trump won, and nobody saw that coming. Okay, so what did they do for 4 straight years? Actually, 6 now. They demonized Russia. They demonized Russia every single day. I'm not a fan of most governments, and I'm not a fan of most world leaders, and I'm definitely not a fan of Vladimir Putin, right? That's just my perspective. But the country of Russia, it doesn't seem to be much more evil than any of our allies, especially like Saudi Arabia. We can go on, and things we've done ourselves. So 6 years in the making, they have brought us to a point, and now they're demonizing China. They literally had Americans afraid of a white balloon floating up in the sky. You've got satellites that can read, your texts on your phones from all the way up in space. China doesn't need a balloon to spy. It's not 1870. They're not spying with balloons. It's insanely ridiculous. They want us to hate both countries. And now the war on TikTok is going on. And don't think it's not related to this. They don't want TikTok. They don't want to not be able to control that social media platform where you can kind of get anything, because the algorithm isn't like Twitter or Meta, Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat, and all of that. I do fear that they want that. That there are some people who believe we can win a nuclear war. And so what if tons of people die? They think they'll survive. And that is disturbing.
Yeah, you guys have no idea how sick these people are. You are 100% right about Hillary Clinton. You guys have no idea the bullet that we dodged with Hillary Clinton. We dodged the bullet. I did not vote for her. I voted for Joe Stein in 2016, and I would do it every single day of the week. Because Hillary Clinton called for a no-fly zone in Syria and called for shooting down Russian planes. She wanted war with Russia. And this is one of the reasons why Russia wanted Trump to beat Hillary, because Trump is way less insane than Hillary on this issue. And what liberals don't tell you is that Russia wanted Barack Obama to win over Mitt Romney and spread propaganda to help Barack Obama beat Mitt Romney, because Barack Obama famously rebuked Mitt Romney when he was pretending that Russia was our enemy. And Barack Obama was like, what do you think this is, the 1980s? That was the famous line from Obama. That when liberals
remember that
had the brain broken. So Barack Obama, the drone strike king, Hillary Clinton saw his administration, and there was a story that came out in the Hill that I covered a long time ago that said that Hillary Clinton, and this is before the election loss, it said Hillary Clinton is pursuing a more muscular foreign policy. So Hillary Clinton saw Barack Obama, the drone strike king, the person who took 2 wars that George W. Bush had to turn to 7. Her response to Barack Obama was, "You fucking pussy." That's it. You guys understand what Hillary Clinton would have did to the world? Look at what Joe Biden is doing now. And then that would have happened faster and hella more aggressive with a more competent Hillary Clinton, because the Biden administration is definitely 100% incompetent. Hillary is an accomplished, competent warmonger. She will go.
Remember,
go ahead, CJ. Go ahead.
Let's remind everybody, there was a debate. This is how they tell the story about Libya. There was a debate. Obama was on leaning to the no invading or no not going in, right, and taking out Gaddafi. And Hillary was the one who was in the room saying, let's go in. She was always the one advocating more. She was always the one that was on that side. So we absolutely dodged a bullet with her. I'll do some announcements, and then you can go with, you ready for the Marjorie Taylor Greene story?
Yeah,
Nick?
we can do that one next.
Yeah, all right. So let's do a couple of quick announcements here.
Hey, I'm gonna share this just because I want to back what I said. Just real quick, not long. This is what I was just talking about. I don't tell you guys just believe me, right? I always want to show you guys some receipts. Look at the date here. This September 2015. This is one of many. I just Googled this. You can find many articles that said the same thing. The Wise Hawk. Hillary Clinton is offering voters a more muscular version of President Obama's foreign policy. What do you guys understand what would have happened if this psychopath was in charge of the nukes? Anyway, go ahead, CJ. I just want to add that.
I wonder if females have sort of the same reaction that blacks do. And let me give you an example. So you have blacks, but then there are black cops. They always seem to be the worst because they're going out of their way to prove I should be here with the white male. Do women do that too? Have you heard of this type of discussion? So it feels like that's what Hillary Clinton is. Like, to prove I should be here, I'm going to be the most hawkish, in the same way that black cops do that in the same beating of Tyler Nichols.
Look at the Prime Minister of Sweden and Finland, who was allotted as the first ever female progressive Prime Minister in Sweden and Finland. And they all insane neocons who've been calling for war with Russia. When you look at Liz Truss in the UK, all these women European leaders are more hawkish. I won't say more. That's ridiculous. But they are as hawkish, right? I'll correct myself. They are as hawkish as the most insane neocons in the UK and the United States. And the empire learned to shield themselves using black neocons and women, have them out in front, have a more gentler face of imperialism. So 100% right.